No, no, no. That's not possible.
Sarah Williams stood inside a cold storage unit on the edge of Atlanta. Rain hammered the metal roof above her. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the laptop in front of her. On that screen was a dead man, Robert King, billionaire, real estate mogul, the man whose floors she had mopped for 8 years, the man whose coffee she had poured every single morning, the man who had smiled at her every birthday like she was the most important person in the room. And now that dead man was staring at her through a grainy video recording and saying words that made her entire world collapse. "You are my daughter." Sarah's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the wooden desk to keep from falling. Her breath came out in short, painful gasps. Tears poured down her face before she even realized she was crying. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible." But Robert King kept talking. His voice was tired. His face was thin. His eyes were full of something Sarah had never seen in them before. Regret. How did Sarah Williams end up standing in a storage unit watching a dead billionaire call her his daughter? How did a quiet maid from rural Tennessee become the most talked about woman in America overnight? How did a simple will reading turn into a nightmare that would put her life in danger? Let me tell you a story that will shake you to your core. A story about secrets buried so deep that the truth had to claw its way out of a dead man's grave. A story about greed so powerful it turned blood against blood. And a story about one woman who had nothing but the truth and refused to let anyone take it from her. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is going to take you on a ride you will never forget. Now let us begin. 3 days earlier, the sky over Atlanta was dark and heavy with rain. Not the gentle kind of rain that makes you want to curl up with a blanket. No, this was angry rain. The kind that hits the ground like it has something to prove. The kind that makes the whole world feel like it is holding its breath. And that is exactly what everyone inside the King mansion was doing, holding their breath. The grand library of the King estate was packed. Over 50 people sat in rows of polished wooden chairs. Every single one of them was dressed in black. Every single one of them had come for the same reason. Money. Robert Elijah King was dead. Heart attack at 72. He had built one of the largest real estate empires in America from nothing. A black man from the south side of Chicago who had turned $2,000 into nearly $4 billion. He had been brilliant, ruthless, complicated. And now he was gone, and every person sitting in that library wanted to know one thing. Who gets the money? In the front row sat the 3 King children. And if you looked at them, you would think you were watching 3 actors in a courtroom drama. First was Marcus King, 48 years old, eldest son, tailored black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He sat with his legs crossed and his hands folded like a man who had already decided the outcome. Marcus ran the day-to-day operations of King Enterprises. He had his father's jawline and his father's ambition. But behind those calm, dark eyes was something else entirely, something colder. Marcus King smiled like a man who was used to getting what he wanted, and he always did. Next to him was Vivian King, 44 years old, middle child. She wore a black designer dress with pearl earrings that caught the light every time she moved her head. Vivian was sharp, the kind of woman who could insult you so elegantly you would thank her for it. She had married rich and divorced richer, and now she wanted what she believed was rightfully hers, the King fortune. She sat with her chin lifted slightly as if the chair beneath her was not quite expensive enough for her taste, and at the end of the row sat Darius King, 34 years old, the youngest, the quiet one, the one who did not quite fit. While his siblings wore designer black, Darius wore a simple dark jacket that looked like it had been through a few too many winters. He had not spoken to his father in nearly 6 years. He was an artist, a painter, the kind of man his family called a dreamer when they were being polite, and a disappointment when they were not. But Darius had shown up today, not for money, for closure. Behind the family sat cousins and aunts and uncles and business associates and lawyers and people who probably had no business being there, but showed up anyway because that is what people do when a billionaire dies. They gather like birds on a wire waiting to see which way the wind blows. And standing at the very back of the room near the serving table was Sarah Williams. She wore a simple gray dress and a white apron. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She held a silver tray with cups of coffee and tea. Her job today was the same job it had been for 8 years. Serve, clean, be invisible. Nobody looked at her. Nobody ever looked at her. She was furniture, a fixture, part of the background. And Sarah had made peace with that a long time ago. She had grown up invisible. Foster homes in Tennessee, group homes, apartments with paper-thin walls and refrigerators that were always empty. She had learned early that the world was not designed for people like her, so she had stopped expecting it to notice her. She poured coffee. She wiped counters. She made herself useful. And every single morning for 8 years she had arrived at the King mansion at exactly 6 a.m. and left at exactly 8 p.m. Robert King had always been kind to her. Not in a loud way, in a quiet way. He remembered her birthday. He asked about her day. Once when she had been sick for a week, he had personally called to check on her. She had thought it was strange at the time. A billionaire calling his maid to ask if she needed soup, but she had not questioned it. She should have. At the front of the room, attorney Charles Whitmore stood behind a mahogany podium. He was a tall, thin man with silver hair and glasses that sat on the edge of his nose like they were always about to fall. He had been Robert King's personal attorney for over 30 years, and right now he looked like a man who wished he had called in sick. Charles adjusted his glasses and unfolded the document. The room went silent, not quiet, silent, the kind of silence that has weight, the kind you can feel pressing against your ears. Robert Elijah King, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, Charles began. Every person in that room leaned forward. Some of them did it subtly. Some of them did not bother hiding it at all. Marcus King's eyes locked onto the document like a hawk watching a mouse. Charles read for several minutes. Properties were listed, investment accounts, business holdings. A vacation home in the Bahamas went to a cousin. A trust fund was established for a charity Robert had supported for decades. A vintage car collection was split among several associates. Standard stuff, rich people stuff. Then Charles paused. His face changed. It was subtle, just a flicker. But Sarah noticed it from the back of the room. His eyes widened slightly behind those silver glasses. His mouth opened, and then closed as if his brain was telling him to read the words, but his instincts were telling him to run. Vivian noticed too. "What is it?" Vivian asked sharply. Charles cleared his throat. "Remainder of my estate," he read slowly, "including my controlling shares of King Enterprises, all personal accounts, all remaining real estate holdings, and all assets not previously designated in this document." Room was so still you could hear the rain tapping against the windows. "Shall be inherited solely and entirely by." Marcus leaned forward. Vivian gripped the arm of her chair. Even Darius looked up. Charles swallowed hard. "Sarah Williams." Nothing happened. For exactly 3 seconds nothing happened. Then the room exploded. Vivian shot to her feet. Her chair scraped across the hardwood floor with a screech that cut through the air like a knife. "Excuse me," Vivian said. Her voice was high and tight. "Did you just say Sarah Williams?" Charles nodded slowly. "That is what the document states." Marcus laughed, but it was not a real laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes right before someone flips a table. It was low and sharp and dangerous. "Sarah Williams," Marcus repeated. He turned around in his chair and scanned the room. His eyes searched every face until they landed on the woman in the gray dress standing at the back with a tray of coffee. Sarah. Every head in the room turned. 50 pairs of eyes landed on her at once. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The tray in her hands began to shake. The cups rattled against each other. Sarah whispered. The word came out before she could stop it. It was not loud. It was barely a breath, but in that silence it sounded like a scream. Marcus stood up slowly. "This is a joke," Marcus said. His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. "Charles, tell me this is a joke." "I assure you, Mr. King, this document has been verified," Charles replied. His hands were shaking slightly. "Her father signed it in my presence 6 months ago. It is legally binding." Vivian's face turned a shade of red that Sarah had never seen on a human being before. "My father left $4 billion to the Maid." Vivian said each word slowly, as if saying them faster would make them more insane. "The woman who cleans the toilets." Sarah flinched. The tray slipped from her hands. Cups shattered on the floor. Coffee splashed across the hardwood. Every eye in the room watched it happen. Nobody moved to help her. Sarah stammered. I don't understand." "Neither do we," Vivian screamed. Marcus raised his hand, a calm gesture. The kind of gesture a man makes when he is already planning his next 10 moves. "Charles," Marcus said quietly. "We will be contesting this immediately." Charles nodded. "That is your right." Darius sat quietly through all of it. He had not stood. He had not yelled. He had not even raised his voice. But his eyes were fixed on Sarah, and they were not angry. They were curious. because Sarah looked genuinely terrified. Not greedy, not smug, not like a woman who had just won the lottery. She looked like a woman who had just been told the sky was falling and it was aimed directly at her head. Now if you're watching this and your jaw is on the floor, you are not alone. But trust me when I tell you that the will reading was just the beginning. What comes next will make this look like a warm-up. Stay with me. Within 12 hours, the story went nuclear. Every major news network in America ran the headline. Billionaire leaves entire fortune to Made It was everywhere. Television, social media, podcasts, group chats, barbershops, hair salons, office break rooms. Everyone in America had an opinion about Sarah Williams, and they were not shy about sharing it. Some people called her a hero, a Cinderella story, a real-life rags-to-riches fairy tale, but most people were not that kind. The internet tore Sarah apart: gold digger, con artist, home wrecker, manipulator, thief. Strangers who had never met her wrote paragraphs about what kind of person she must be. They created theories. Maybe she had been sleeping with Robert. Maybe she had blackmailed him. Maybe she had drugged him and forced him to sign the will. The theories got wilder by the hour. Sarah sat in her small apartment on the east side of Atlanta and watched it all unfold on her phone screen. Her face was on every website. Her name was trending on every platform. Reporters had already tracked down her address and were camped outside her building. She had not eaten in 2 days. Her phone rang nonstop, numbers she did not recognize, voicemails she could not bring herself to listen to. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall and tried to understand how her life had been completely destroyed in less than a day. Why her? Why had Robert King chosen her? She was nobody. She had always been nobody. She had no family, no connections, no power. She cleaned houses for a living and went home to a 1-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet and a cat named Biscuit. Why would a billionaire leave everything to her? Then 3 days after the will reading, something arrived that changed everything. It came in a plain brown package. No return address. No markings. Just her name written in neat handwriting. Sarah opened it carefully. Inside was a single brass key. And a handwritten note. She unfolded it. Her hands went cold. The handwriting was unmistakable. She had seen it 1,000 times on grocery lists and notes left on the kitchen counter of the mansion. Robert's handwriting. The note. You are reading this, then they know about the money. They still do not know about the truth. Go to storage unit 317 on Industrial Boulevard. Go alone. Trust no one. Robert. Sarah read it 3 times, then a 4th. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might crack a rib. What truth? What was Robert talking about? And why did a dead man sound so afraid? She should have called the police. She should have called a lawyer. She should have called anyone with a badge or a degree or a functioning sense of self-preservation. But she did not, because something in that note called to her. Something deeper than curiosity. Something that felt like recognition. Like a door she had been walking past her entire life was finally opening. That night Sarah drove to Industrial Boulevard. The rain had returned. Because of course it had. Atlanta rain does not care about your plans. It shows up whenever it feels like it and stays as long as it wants, like a relative during the holidays. The storage facility was old and quiet. The kind of place where people keep things they do not want found. Flickering fluorescent lights. Cracked concrete. The smell of rust and forgotten things. Unit 317 sat at the very back. Dust covered the lock. Sarah inserted the key. Click. The metal door groaned as she pulled it up. Inside was a single wooden desk. A closed laptop. And dozens of sealed cardboard boxes stacked neatly along the walls. Nothing else. No treasure. No gold, no piles of cash, just boxes and a laptop and the heavy silence of a dead man's secrets. Sarah approached the desk slowly. Her footsteps echoed off the concrete floor. A yellow sticky note sat on the laptop. Watch me first. Her finger hovered over the power button. Part of her wanted to close the door and walk away. Go home, feed Biscuit. Pretend none of this ever happened. Let the lawyers fight. Let the King family have the money. Let the world forget her name. But another part of her had spent 36 years not knowing who she was, and that part pressed play. The screen flickered to life. Robert King appeared. He looked different from the man she remembered. Thinner, older. His dark skin had a grayish tint. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion. He was sitting in what looked like a private office. Behind him was a window showing a city skyline at night. He looked directly into the camera. If you are watching this, Sarah, then I am gone. Sarah pressed her hand against her mouth. Tears came immediately. Robert smiled sadly. The kind of smile that carries the weight of decades. Owe you the truth. I owe you more than that. I owe you a lifetime. But the truth is all I have left to give. He paused, took a breath. and then said the words that stopped Sarah's heart. "You are my daughter." Sarah stared at the screen, her brain refused to process the words. She started, but nothing came out. Robert continued. "You were born 36 years ago in a small hospital in Memphis, Tennessee." Sarah's knees buckled. She grabbed the desk again. "Your mother's name was Catherine Hayes. She was 23, I was 25. We were young, we were broke, and we were so in love it scared both of us." Tears streamed down Sarah's face and she did not bother wiping them. "Catherine was white, I was black. In the South in those years that was not always easy, but we did not care. She was the most beautiful soul I ever met. And when you were born, Sarah, you had her eyes. You still do." Sarah touched her face instinctively, her mother's eyes. She had spent her whole life wondering where they came from. 6 months after you were born, Catherine was killed in a car accident. Robert's voice cracked. I fell apart. I could not function. I could not take care of myself, let alone a baby. He wiped his eyes. My family stepped in, my mother, my brothers. They told me they would find you a good home, a safe home. They said I was too broken, too poor, too unstable. They said you would be better off without me. Robert looked directly into the camera. His eyes burned with a pain that 36 years had not healed. I believed them. God help me, I believed them. Sarah was sobbing now, not quietly. Deep shaking sobs that echoed through the storage unit. They arranged an adoption, a closed adoption. No records, no trail, no way for either of us to find the other. Robert's jaw tightened. They erased you from my life, Sarah, and they lied to me for decades. He leaned closer to the camera. I discovered the truth 2 years ago. A private DNA investigation confirmed what I had begun to suspect. You were my daughter. You had been living in Atlanta, working as a housekeeper. And by a coincidence so cruel it must have been fate, you had been working in my house for 6 years without either of us knowing. Sarah could barely breathe. 6 years. She had served this man coffee for 6 years. She had cleaned his house, folded his clothes, organized his library, and he was her father. Once I knew the truth, I wanted to tell you immediately, but I could not, because I had discovered something else, something dangerous. Robert's face hardened. Someone inside my family has been stealing from King Enterprises for over 20 years. Hundreds of millions of dollars funneled through offshore accounts and shell companies. And when I began investigating, I realized that the person responsible would do anything to keep it hidden. Sarah's tears slowed. Fear began replacing grief. I could not tell you the truth while I was alive because it would have put you in immediate danger. So I did the only thing I could. I put everything in the will. The money. The company, everything. I gave it all to you. Robert paused. Because I wanted to make you rich, Sarah. Because the evidence is in these boxes. And the only way to protect it was to make sure you were the one who controlled the company. If you control King Enterprises, they cannot bury what I found. Sarah looked at the boxes lining the walls, dozens of them, full of evidence. They will fight you for everything, Robert continued. They will call you names. They will try to destroy your reputation. They will threaten you, and if they are desperate enough, they will try to hurt you. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Do not trust anyone. Screen flickered. Then one final message appeared in white text on a black screen. Truth is worth more than the money. Fight for it. Dad, the video ended. Sarah sat in the cold silence of that storage unit and cried harder than she had ever cried in her life. For 36 years, she had wondered who her father was. She had imagined him 1,000 different ways. Sometimes she imagined he was a truck driver. Sometimes a soldier. Sometimes she imagined he was dead. And sometimes on the hardest nights she imagined he was out there somewhere looking for her too. She never imagined he was a billionaire. She never imagined she had been cleaning his house. And she never imagined that finding the truth would put her life at risk. After several minutes, Sarah wiped her face and began opening the first box. Inside were financial records, bank statements, wire transfers, account numbers for offshore holdings in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, shell company registrations, forged signatures, fraudulent invoices, and one name appeared on almost every single document: Marcus King, Robert's eldest son, the man who had stared at her with cold fury during the will reading, the man who had called her a maid with venom dripping from every syllable. He had been stealing from his own father's company for over 2 decades. Sarah's blood ran cold. Then her phone rang. She jumped so hard she almost knocked the laptop off the desk. Unknown number. She answered. Silence. Then a voice, distorted, mechanical, unrecognizable. You should have left that storage unit alone. Call ended. Sarah's whole body went rigid. Someone knew she was here. Someone was watching. She grabbed the boxes and rushed outside into the rain. As she loaded them into her car, her eyes caught something across the parking lot. A black SUV parked in the shadows, engine running, lights off. just sitting there waiting. Watching, Sarah threw the last box into her trunk and jumped into the driver's seat. Her hands shook so badly, it took her 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. She peeled out of the parking lot without looking back. The black SUV did not follow. It did not need to, because whoever was driving it already knew where she lived. As Sarah sped through the rain-soaked streets of Atlanta, her mind raced faster than her car. The inheritance was never about money. Robert did not leave her billions because he wanted her to be rich. He left it because the money came with control. And control came with access to records, access to accounts, access to proof that someone inside his own family had robbed him blind. The will was not a gift, it was a weapon. And Sarah had just picked it up. The question was whether she would survive long enough to use it. She looked in her rearview mirror. The road behind her was dark and empty, but Sarah knew the truth now. She was not alone on that road. She had never been alone. Someone had been watching her long before tonight. And that someone was very, very afraid of what she might find. Because the boxes in her trunk did not just contain evidence of theft. They contained evidence of something much worse. Something that would shake the King family to its foundation. Something that would prove Robert King's death was not what it seemed. And something that would reveal there was another secret buried even deeper than Sarah's identity. A secret that connected her to a name she had never heard, a ghost from the King family's past, a name that would change everything. Again, now if you have made it this far in the story, I know your mind is spinning. Who was in that SUV? What else is in those boxes? And what is the secret that is even bigger than Sarah being Robert's daughter? I promise you the answers are coming. And when they do, you will not believe what happens next. Let's continue the story. Sarah Williams did not sleep that night. She sat in her small apartment with every light turned on and every door locked twice. The boxes from the storage unit were spread across her living room floor. Documents covered her coffee table. Her laptop sat open with Robert's final video paused on his face, her father's face. She still could not believe it. Biscuit the cat sat on the windowsill staring out at the street below. Every few minutes Sarah would join him and peek through the curtains. The black SUV was there, parked across the street. Engine off now, lights off. But Sarah knew someone was inside, watching, waiting. The distorted voice from the phone call echoed in her mind on an endless loop. You should have left that storage unit alone. Who had called her? How did they know she was at the storage facility? And more importantly, what were they willing to do to stop her from looking further? Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up another stack of financial documents. She had spent the last 4 hours trying to make sense of them. Most of it was beyond her understanding. Numbers and account codes and corporate names that meant nothing to her. But one thing was painfully clear. Marcus King had been stealing from King Enterprises for over 20 years. The transfers started small. A few 100,000 here, $1 million there. Rooted through shell companies with names like Oceanview Holdings and Greenfield Capital Partners. The money moved through banks in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland and Singapore before disappearing into accounts that only Marcus controlled. Over 2 decades, the total amount stolen was staggering. Nearly $800 million. Sarah sat back and rubbed her eyes. $800 million, gone. And Robert had discovered it. That was why he had left everything to her. Not because he wanted to make her rich. Because he needed someone outside the family to have control. Someone who could not be silenced. Someone who would have legal authority to access the company's records and expose what Marcus had done. Sarah was not an heir, she was a weapon. But weapons only work if they survive long enough to be used. Sarah picked up a sealed envelope hidden beneath the financial documents. She had noticed it earlier but had been too overwhelmed to open it. Now she tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was another letter from Robert, his handwriting, his voice. Even from beyond the grave he was still guiding her. The letter read, Sarah, if you have opened this envelope, then events are unfolding exactly as I feared. By now you have seen the financial evidence against Marcus. You understand why I could not go to the authorities while I was alive. Marcus has connections everywhere. Police, politicians, judges. He has spent 20 years building a wall of protection around himself. Anyone who tried to expose him would have been destroyed before they could speak a single word. Sarah's stomach tightened. She kept reading. But there is something else you need to know. Something I discovered only weeks before my death. Something that changes everything. Sarah leaned closer to the page. If anything happens to me unexpectedly, do not assume it was natural. I have reason to believe my life is in danger. Marcus knows I found the evidence. He knows I have been investigating. and I fear he will do whatever is necessary to protect himself. Sarah stopped breathing. Not natural. Robert had officially died of a heart attack. Everyone said so, the doctors, the coroner, the newspapers. Heart attack at 72, tragic but not suspicious. But Robert himself was saying something different. He was saying he might have been murdered. Sarah felt the walls of her apartment closing in. This was bigger than money. This was bigger than inheritance. This was about a man who might have been killed by his own son. She kept reading. There is one final piece of evidence hidden where nobody would think to look. But before I tell you where there is something else you need to know. Sarah turned the page. You are not the only secret in this family. She frowned. What did that mean? Before she could read further, a loud crash echoed from somewhere below her apartment. Sarah jumped to her feet. Biscuit hissed and leaped off the windowsill. The sound had come from downstairs. The building's main entrance. Someone had forced their way inside. Heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell, getting closer. Sarah's apartment was on the 3rd floor. The footsteps climbed. One floor, then another, then another. Sarah's pulse exploded. She grabbed the boxes and dragged them toward her bedroom. Her mind raced. Fire escape. Window, closet, anywhere. The footsteps stopped, right outside her door. Silence. Then bang, the door shook violently. Someone kicked it again. Bang, the frame cracked. Sarah covered her mouth with both hands. She pressed herself against the bedroom wall and tried not to make a sound. Tears streamed down her face. This was it. This was how it ended. Alone in her apartment with boxes full of evidence that nobody would ever see. Another kick. Bang, the door burst open. Someone entered. She could hear them moving through her living room. Heavy boots on the wooden floor. Opening drawers. Flipping over cushions. Looking for something or someone. Sarah quietly pushed open her bedroom window. The fire escape was right there. Rusted and old, but it would hold. 3 stories down. She could make it if she was careful. The bedroom door handle began to turn. Sarah's heart stopped. Then a voice shouted from the hallway. Police, freeze. Everything went still. Running footsteps. The intruder fled. Sarah heard shouting. Chaos, more footsteps. Then sirens, loud and close. For several minutes she stayed frozen against the wall, too terrified to move. Too terrified to breathe. Her legs finally gave out and she slid to the floor and sat there shaking. Eventually there was a knock at her bedroom door. A calm voice spoke. Miss Williams, Atlanta Police, it is safe to come out. Sarah opened the door slowly. 2 uniformed officers stood in her destroyed living room. Behind them was a face she did not expect to see. Darius King, Robert's youngest son, the quiet one from the will reading. Sarah stared at him. What are you doing here? She asked. Her voice was hoarse. Darius looked uneasy. His hands were in his pockets and his shoulders were tense. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. I have been trying to call you, Darius said. You followed me? No, his expression darkened. I have been followed too. Sarah's heart sank. Darius stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The officers remained in the hallway securing the building. What I am about to tell you sounds insane, Darius said. Sarah laughed bitterly. Try me. A week ago I was cleaning toilets. Now I am apparently a billionaire heiress with a target on my back. Nothing sounds insane anymore. Darius did not smile. My father did not die from a heart attack. Words hit Sarah like a punch to the chest. She had just read the same suspicion in Robert's letter, but hearing it out loud from Robert's own son made it terrifyingly real. What are you talking about? Sarah asked quietly. Darius sat down on the edge of her couch. He looked exhausted. The kind of exhausted that goes deeper than sleep. After the will reading, I started asking questions, he said. Something about the whole thing did not sit right with me. My father was in perfect health. He exercised every day. He ate clean. His doctors said he had the heart of a man 20 years younger. Sarah listened closely. So I pulled some strings, called in some favors. I got access to the coroner's report and had it reviewed by an independent medical examiner. And Darius swallowed hard. They found traces of a toxin in his system, a rare compound that mimics the symptoms of cardiac arrest. If you did not know to look for it, you would never find it. Sarah felt the room spinning. Poison, she whispered. Darius nodded grimly. Someone poisoned my father, and I think I know who. Sarah already knew the answer. Marcus, she said. Darius looked at her with surprise. You know. Sarah walked to the boxes scattered across her living room floor. She pulled out a stack of financial documents and handed them to Darius. Your father left me more than money, she said. He left me evidence. Darius looked through the documents. His face changed with every page. Confusion became shock. Shock became horror. Horror became rage. $800 million, Darius said slowly. Marcus stole $800 million from our own father. Over 20 years, Sarah confirmed. And your father found out. That is why he left everything to me, because if I control the company, I can expose what Marcus did. I have legal access to all the records, all the accounts, everything. Set the documents down, his hands were shaking. This is why Marcus wants you dead, he said quietly. Not because of the money, because of what you can prove. Sarah nodded. They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by a dead man's secrets. Both of them targets, both of them alone. Then Darius said something that changed everything. There is more. Sarah looked at him. Your father's letter mentioned something, she said. He said I was not the only secret in this family. What does that mean? Darius hesitated. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an old photograph. It showed Robert King as a young man, maybe 25 or 26. He was standing beside a woman Sarah did not recognize. And in the woman's arms was a baby boy. Written on the back of the photo in faded ink were two words. Jacob, age 1. Sarah frowned. Who is Jacob? Darius took a deep breath. When I was 16, I overheard my parents arguing. It was late at night. They thought I was asleep. My mother was crying. My father was packing, and he said something I never forgot. Sarah waited. He said there was another child, a son that nobody knew about. Sarah's eyes widened. Heir, another secret, Darius said. My father spent years searching for him. I do not know if he ever found him. But if Jacob is still alive, then he has just as much claim to the king fortune as anyone else. Sarah stared at the photograph. A baby boy named Jacob, Robert's son, another piece of the puzzle, another person who might be in danger. At that exact moment, Sarah's phone buzzed. Unknown number, again. This time it was a text message. 4 words. Check the last box. Sarah and Darius looked at each other. Then Sarah walked slowly toward the remaining unopened box. The one sitting in the corner untouched since the storage unit. She had been saving it for last without knowing why. She lifted the lid. Inside was a photo album, nothing else, no documents, no letters, no evidence, just photographs. She opened it carefully. The first few pages showed Robert as a young man, smiling, happy, full of hope. Then she turned the page and froze. One photograph showed Robert standing beside a woman holding a baby boy. The same woman from Darius's photo, the same baby. But this time there was a caption written beneath the image. Jacob King, age 1, 1985. Sarah turned the page, more photos. Jacob at age 3. Laughing on a swing set. Jacob at age 5. Blowing out birthday candles. Jacob at age 7. Standing beside Robert in front of a Christmas tree. Then suddenly nothing, the photos stopped. As if the child had vanished, Sarah looked at Darius. What happened to him? Darius shook his head. I do not know. My father never spoke about him. Not once. Sarah noticed something else. A folded piece of paper hidden inside the back cover of the album. She pulled it out carefully and unfolded it. It was an address, no explanation, no note, no context, just an address in a coastal town called Beaufort about 3 hours south of Atlanta. And beneath the address was a name. Jacob Reed, not Jacob King, Jacob Reed. He had changed his name. He had been hiding. Sarah looked at Darius. We need to find him, she said. Darius nodded. If he is alive, he might be in danger too. Marcus will not stop until everyone who knows the truth is gone. They gathered the documents and the photo album and prepared to leave. But as Sarah reached for the light switch, the apartment went dark. Every light in the building vanished. Darkness swallowed the room, silence. Then a small red dot appeared on the far wall, moving slowly. Searching. Sarah's blood ran cold. The red dot crossed the room like a predator stalking prey. And stopped directly on Darius's chest. A laser sight. Someone outside had a rifle and they were taking aim. Get down, Sarah screamed. She tackled Darius to the floor just as the window exploded. Glass flew everywhere. A deafening gunshot echoed through the night. The bullet slammed into the wall exactly where Darius had been standing 1 second earlier. Sarah's ears rang. Her hands were cut from the broken glass. But she was alive. They were both alive. Another shot. This one shattered the lamp beside the couch. Whoever was outside was not trying to scare them. They were trying to kill them. Darius crawled toward the kitchen. Stay down, he shouted. Sarah pressed herself flat against the floor. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Another shot. Then suddenly sirens, loud, close. The gunfire stopped. The red laser disappeared. Seconds later, tires screeched outside as the black SUV sped away into the darkness. The sniper was gone. For now. If you are watching this and your heart is pounding, you are not alone. Someone just tried to kill Sarah and Darius. The evidence against Marcus is piling up, and there is still a missing heir named Jacob who might be the key to everything. Trust me when I tell you that what happens next will shock you to your core. Stay tuned because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. 2 hours later, Sarah and Darius sat inside an Atlanta police station. Neither had spoken much since the shooting. Sarah's hands were bandaged. Darius had a cut above his left eyebrow. They both looked like people who had just survived something they were not supposed to survive. The detective assigned to their case introduced himself as Detective Leon Cole. He was a tall black man in his early 50s with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much. He moved slowly and spoke even slower. The kind of man who listened more than he talked. The kind of man who noticed things other people missed. He sat across from Sarah and Darius and listened carefully as they explained everything. The inheritance. The storage unit, the evidence against Marcus, the poison, the sniper. When they finished, Detective Cole remained silent for a long moment. Then he asked a question neither of them expected. Has anyone checked Marcus King's alibi for the night his father died? Darius frowned. What do you mean? He was at a charity gala. It was all over the news. Detective Cole opened a file. That is what the official story says, but I did some digging. He slid a photograph across the table, security camera footage. A timestamp in the corner, 11:47 p.m. the night Robert King died. The image showed Marcus King entering the back door of the King mansion, not attending a gala, entering the mansion, the same mansion where Robert had died alone in his study just 30 minutes later. Darius's face went pale. He lied, Darius said. Detective Cole nodded. He lied. Sarah stared at the photograph. Marcus had been at the mansion the night Robert died. He had lied about his alibi. And Robert had been poisoned with a substance designed to look like a heart attack. The evidence was overwhelming, but Detective Cole did not look satisfied. He looked worried, very worried. Sarah noticed. What are you not telling us? She asked. Detective Cole hesitated. Then he opened another file. Inside were more photographs, old ones, faded and worn. Crime scene photographs from 22 years ago. Sarah stared. What is this? Detective Cole leaned forward. 22 years ago, a private investigator named Harold Simmons disappeared while working on a case. Darius frowned. What case? He was investigating Robert King. Sarah's stomach dropped. Why? Detective Cole slid another photograph forward. Harold Simmons's body had been found in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta. Officially ruled a robbery gone wrong, unofficially something much darker. Harold was looking into a child, Detective Cole said. A missing child connected to the King family. Sarah's hands went cold. Jacob, she whispered. Detective Cole nodded. Jacob King, born 1985. Disappeared from all records in 1992 when he was 7 years old. No death certificate. No adoption records. No trace. It is like the child simply vanished. Darius shook his head. That is impossible. Children do not just disappear. They do if someone wants them to, Detective Cole replied. The room fell silent. Everything was connecting now. The missing heir, the murdered investigator, the poisoned billionaire, the stolen millions. Someone had been protecting secrets for decades. And anyone who got close to the truth ended up dead. Detective Cole spoke quietly. Do not think Robert King was the first victim, and I do not think he will be the last. Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine. Then her phone buzzed. A new message, no number, no caller ID, just a photograph. Sarah opened it. Her blood froze instantly. The photo showed a man standing outside the police station, right now, watching the building, watching them. He was tall, dark coat, baseball cap pulled low over his face. Below the photo was a message. Stop looking for Jacob. Sarah showed the phone to Darius, his face drained of color. That is impossible, he whispered. Sarah frowned. You know him. Darius stared at the screen. His voice was barely audible. He is supposed to be dead. Sarah's heart stopped. Who is he? Darius looked up. That is Harold Simmons, the private investigator. Detective Cole grabbed the phone. His eyes widened. That man died 22 years ago, but the photograph was time-stamped, today's date. Which meant one of two things. Either a dead man had come back to life, or someone had been lying about his death for over 2 decades. And either way, the question remained. Why was he here now? And why did he not want them to find Jacob? Now I need you to understand something. This story just took a turn that nobody saw coming. A dead private investigator is alive. Marcus King is a murderer and a thief. And somewhere out there is a missing heir named Jacob who holds the key to everything. But I have to warn you, not everyone survives what comes next. Let's continue. The drive from Atlanta to Beaufort took exactly 3 hours and 14 minutes. Sarah Williams counted every single one of them. She sat in the passenger seat of Darius King's old Jeep Cherokee, staring out the window as the city skyline faded into Georgia pine trees, and then into the flat marshlands of the South Carolina coast. The sun was just beginning to rise. Orange and pink light stretched across the horizon like God was trying to paint something beautiful over something ugly. But nothing felt beautiful right now. Everything felt dangerous. Darius drove in silence. His jaw was tight. His knuckles were pale against the steering wheel. He had barely spoken since they left the police station, since seeing that photograph, since realizing that a man who was supposed to have been dead for 22 years was very much alive and standing outside a police station watching them. Harold Simmons, the private investigator who had been hired decades ago to find Jacob King. The man whose body had been found in an abandoned warehouse. The man whose death had been ruled a robbery, except he was not dead, which meant his death had been staged, which meant someone had helped him disappear, and which meant everything they thought they knew about this case had just gotten 10 times more complicated. Sarah broke the silence first. "You have not said a word in 2 hours." Darius glanced at her. "I am trying to figure out which part of this nightmare to process first." Sarah almost laughed. Almost. "Take a number. I found out I am the secret daughter of a billionaire who was murdered by his own son. And now we are driving to find another secret child who might also be dead. So trust me when I say the line for processing nightmares starts behind me." Darius looked at her for a long moment, then despite everything he smiled, just barely. "You are tougher than you look, Sarah Williams." "I clean houses for a living, Darius." "You have to be tough to scrub a man's toilet for 8 years and still show up smiling on Monday." This time Darius actually laughed. It was short, tired, but real, and for just a moment the weight in the car lifted, but only for a moment. Because as they crossed the bridge into Beaufort, the weight came back heavier than before. Beaufort was the kind of town that looked like a postcard. Spanish moss hanging from oak trees. Old Victorian houses painted in soft blues and yellows and greens. A quiet harbor where fishing boats rocked gently in the morning tide. The kind of town where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. The address from the photo album led to a modest house on a hill overlooking the ocean, white paint peeling at the edges. A small garden out front with tomatoes and herbs. A wooden porch with 2 rocking chairs that looked like they had been sitting there since the beginning of time. Nothing about this house suggested wealth. Nothing about this house suggested danger. Sarah and Darius climbed the porch steps. Sarah knocked, no answer. She knocked again, nothing. Then slowly the door opened. An older black woman appeared. Late 60s. Silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a simple floral dress and reading glasses around her neck. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were sharp. The kind of eyes that had seen enough of the world to be suspicious of anyone standing on her porch uninvited. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was polite but guarded. Sarah hesitated. "We are looking for Jacob Reed." Change was immediate. The woman's face transformed. Politeness vanished, replaced by something raw and real fear. "You need to leave," the woman said. She began closing the door. Darius stepped forward. "Please, we just need to talk to him. It is important." Woman shook her head. "No." "Why?" Her eyes filled with tears. She gripped the edge of the door like it was the only thing keeping her standing. "Because Jacob is dead." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. "Dead." The woman opened the door wider, not to invite them in but because her legs seemed unable to hold her anymore. She leaned against the doorframe and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "My name is Dorothy Reed," she said quietly. "Jacob was my son." Sarah and Darius exchanged a glance. Dorothy led them inside. The house was small and warm. Every wall was covered with framed photographs, family pictures, birthday parties, fishing trips, Christmas mornings. A life lived simply but fully. One photograph hung larger than the rest above the fireplace. It showed a tall black man with dark hair and kind eyes. He was standing on the deck of a fishing boat holding a large catch and grinning like a man who had everything he needed. The resemblance to Robert King was impossible to ignore. Same jawline, same forehead, same wide, genuine smile. Sarah stared at it. Dorothy noticed. "He looked just like him," Dorothy said softly. "Just like his father." Darius sat down slowly. "You knew about Robert King," Dorothy nodded. "Jacob did not know for most of his life. He grew up believing his father was a man named Thomas Reed, my late husband. Thomas adopted Jacob as a baby, raised him as his own, loved him as his own. As far as Jacob knew, Thomas was his daddy, and that was that." Sarah leaned forward. "When did Jacob find out the truth?" Dorothy's face darkened. 5 years ago." She sat down in the rocking chair by the window. Her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes stared at something far away. Jacob got a letter, no return address. Inside was a DNA report and a birth certificate, his real birth certificate. It had Robert King's name on it. Sarah's chest tightened. He was shocked, Dorothy continued. Angry, confused. He did not understand why he had been given away, why his real father had never come looking for him. He spent 3 days barely eating, barely sleeping. Just sitting on that porch staring at the water trying to make sense of it all. Dorothy wiped her eyes. Then on the 4th day he decided to reach out. He wrote a letter to Robert King, introduced himself, asked for nothing, just wanted to meet the man who was his biological father. Sarah's throat tightened. Robert respond? Dorothy shook her head. Letter never reached him. At least that is what I believe, because 3 days after Jacob mailed that letter his fishing boat exploded. Room went completely silent. Sarah felt the floor shift beneath her. Exploded. Darius whispered. Dorothy nodded. 6 miles offshore, early morning, nobody else was on board. The Coast Guard said it was a fuel leak, an accident. She looked directly at Sarah. But I never believed that, not for 1 second. Sarah's mind raced. The pattern was undeniable. Harold Simmons investigated Jacob. He was supposedly murdered. Jacob discovered his true identity. His boat exploded. Robert King collected evidence against Marcus. He was poisoned. And now Sarah had inherited the evidence. And someone had already tried to kill her and Darius. Anyone who got close to the truth died, or disappeared. Mrs. Reed, Sarah said carefully, I need to tell you something, and it is going to be difficult to hear. Dorothy looked at her. Robert King was my father too. Older woman's eyes widened. Jacob was my brother. Dorothy stared at Sarah, a white woman sitting in her living room claiming to be the daughter of Robert King, claiming to be the sister of her dead son. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Dorothy stood up slowly. She walked to the fireplace and pulled a small box from behind the photographs. She opened it and removed a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Sarah. It was the DNA report that had been sent to Jacob 5 years ago. Sarah read it carefully. And there at the bottom listed under biological father was Robert Elijah King, the same name. The same man. Dorothy looked at Sarah with tears streaming down her face. Jacob used to say he felt like half of him was missing, like there was a piece of the puzzle he could never find. She reached out and touched Sarah's hand. Maybe you were that piece. Sarah broke down. Right there in that small living room in Beaufort, surrounded by photographs of a brother she never knew existed, Sarah Williams cried so hard her whole body shook. She cried for Jacob, for Robert, for Catherine, her mother, for 36 years of not knowing. For every birthday she spent alone wondering if anybody out there shared her blood. Darius sat quietly and let her grieve. Some pain cannot be rushed. Now I know this is heavy. I know some of you watching this right now have tears in your own eyes, but I need you to stay with me because what happens next changes everything. After several minutes, Sarah wiped her face and took a deep breath. Reed, is there anyone else in Jacob's family? Anyone who might know more about what happened to him? Dorothy hesitated, then she called out toward the back of the house. Ethan, come here please. Footsteps. A young man entered the room, early 20s, tall, athletic build. Clean-shaven with deep brown skin and eyes that were so familiar it made Sarah's breath catch. Those were Robert King's eyes, no question, no doubt. The resemblance was not subtle, it was not vague. It was exact. Like looking at a photograph of Robert King 50 years younger, Dorothy placed her hand on the young man's shoulder. This is my grandson, Jacob's son. Young man extended his hand. My name is Ethan Reed. Darius stood up slowly. He stared at Ethan as if he were seeing a ghost. Because in a way he was. Ethan Reed was Robert King's grandson, the last living descendant of the secret bloodline. Another heir, another target. Sarah shook his hand. Ethan, do you know anything about your grandfather? About Robert King? Ethan's face tightened. I know he was rich. I know my father died because of him. And I know that somebody does not want me asking questions about it. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? Ethan walked to the window. 6 months ago, I started getting phone calls. No caller ID. No voice, just silence. Then hang up. Dorothy looked at the floor. Then the letters started. Ethan continued. Plain envelopes, no return address. Every single one said the same thing. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Sarah. Written in block letters were 5 words. Stop asking about your father. Sarah's blood went cold. The same people who had threatened her were threatening Ethan. And they had been doing it for months. Darius looked at Sarah. Marcus, he said. Sarah nodded. It has to be. Ethan shook his head. It is not just Marcus. Everyone turned to look at him. 3 weeks ago, I followed one of the cars that had been watching this house. A black SUV. Sarah's heart stopped. The same black SUV. It drove to a private airfield outside of Charleston. A man got out and met with someone on the tarmac. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed them a photograph he had taken from a distance, two men shaking hands beside a private jet. One of them was Marcus King. The other was a tall man in a dark coat and a baseball cap. Sarah recognized him instantly. Harold Simmons, the supposedly dead private investigator. They are working together, Sarah said. Darius stared at the photograph. Simmons faked his death 22 years ago. He has been working for Marcus ever since. Everything clicked into place. 22 years ago, Marcus hired Harold to find Jacob, not to reunite the family, to locate a threat. When Harold found Jacob, he reported back to Marcus. Marcus paid Harold to disappear and staged his death to close the case. Then 5 years ago, when Jacob discovered the truth on his own, Marcus had him killed. And when Robert began investigating the stolen money, Marcus poisoned him too. Marcus King had not just stolen hundreds of millions of dollars. He had murdered his own father. He had murdered his own brother. And now he was coming for Sarah and Ethan. The last two people alive who could expose everything. Sarah stood up. Her tears were gone. Her fear was gone. Something else had replaced them, something harder, something sharper, resolve. We need to go to the police, Sarah said. All of us, right now, we have the financial documents, we have the DNA evidence, we have the photographs of Marcus meeting with Harold, we have the coroner's report showing Robert was poisoned. We have enough. Darius nodded. Detective Cole is already investigating. If we bring him everything, he can get arrest warrants. Dorothy grabbed Ethan's arm. I'm not letting my grandson anywhere near those people. Sarah knelt down in front of Dorothy. Mrs. Reed, I understand your fear. I feel it too. But your son died because the truth was buried. If we do not act now, more people will die. Ethan will never be safe until Marcus is behind bars. Dorothy looked at her grandson. Ethan nodded. She is right, Grandma. Dad deserved better. And so do we. Dorothy closed her eyes, then slowly nodded. They packed everything they had. Documents, photographs, the DNA report, the threatening letters, Ethan's phone with the picture of Marcus and Harold. All of it went into the trunk of the Jeep. As they pulled out of the driveway, Sarah glanced in the side mirror. A black SUV sat at the end of the street. Engine running, Sarah's jaw tightened. We have company. Darius saw it too. Hold on. He floored the gas. The SUV followed. What followed was 30 minutes of pure terror on winding coastal roads. Darius drove like a man possessed, weaving through traffic and cutting through side streets, while the SUV stayed on them like a shadow. But Darius knew something the driver of the SUV did not. He had spent summers in Beaufort as a child. He knew these roads better than anyone. He took a sharp turn down a dirt road that cut through the marsh. The SUV tried to follow, but the soft ground caught its tires. It fishtailed and slid into a ditch. Darius did not stop. He drove straight to the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office. Within an hour, Detective Cole was on the phone coordinating with local authorities. Federal agents were called. Warrants were issued. The evidence was cataloged and secured. By nightfall, Marcus King was arrested at his penthouse in Atlanta. The footage showed federal agents walking Marcus out of his building in handcuffs. He was wearing a $3,000 suit and an expression of absolute disbelief, as if the idea that consequences could ever apply to him had never once crossed his mind. Harold Simmons was picked up 2 days later at a motel in Savannah. He had been living under a fake identity for 22 years. A ghost paid to stay invisible. A weapon Marcus had kept in his back pocket for 2 decades. Both men were charged with fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, and the murders of Robert King and Jacob Reed. The trial lasted 4 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showed every dollar Marcus had stolen. The coroner's report confirmed Robert's poisoning. Harold's own testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, confirmed that Marcus had ordered Jacob's death and that the boat explosion was no accident. Marcus King was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, Sarah sat in the courtroom between Darius and Ethan. She did not cheer. She did not cry. She just closed her eyes and breathed. For the first time in months, she breathed, truly breathed. Now I want to talk to you for a moment. Yes, you, the person watching this right now. Because this story is not just about billionaires and betrayal. This story is about something much deeper than that. So stay with me for just another minute. After the trial, Sarah did something nobody expected. She did not keep the money. Well, not all of it. She restructured King Enterprises and appointed a board of independent directors to run the company transparently. She set up a foundation in Robert's name dedicated to helping children in foster care find their families. She donated $200 million to organizations supporting adoptees searching for biological relatives. She gave Darius his fair share of the inheritance. Despite their differences, Darius had never wanted the empire. He used the money to open an art studio in Atlanta that offered free classes to kids from low-income neighborhoods. She gave Ethan a trust fund that would ensure he and Dorothy never had to worry about money again. Ethan used part of it to rebuild his father's fishing business in Beaufort. He renamed the company Reed and King Fishing, a tribute to both sides of his family. And Vivian King had stayed silent through most of the ordeal. She had not participated in Marcus's crimes, but she had also not asked questions when she should have. After the trial, she reached out to Sarah privately. Their conversation lasted 3 hours. Nobody knows exactly what was said, but when Vivian left, she was crying. And the next week, she enrolled in a grief counseling program and began volunteering at a women's shelter. Some people change when the walls come down. Vivian was one of them. As for Sarah, she moved out of her one-bedroom apartment, but she did not move into the King Mansion. She bought a small house on a quiet street in Decatur just outside Atlanta. 3 bedrooms. A backyard with a garden. A front porch with 2 rocking chairs. Biscuit the cat finally had room to roam. And for the first time in 36 years, Sarah Williams had something she had never had before. A family. Darius came over for dinner every Sunday. Ethan and Dorothy visited once a month. Detective Cole stopped by occasionally to check, and though Sarah suspected he mostly came for her sweet potato pie. One evening, Sarah sat on her porch as the sun went down. Darius was inside washing dishes because Sarah refused to let guests leave without cleaning up. Old habits. Ethan sat on the porch steps scrolling through his phone. Dorothy rocked gently in the chair beside Sarah. The sky was painted in shades of gold and purple. Sarah held a cup of tea and looked out at the street. Dorothy glanced at her. "You all right, child?" Sarah smiled. "Yeah, I think I am." Dorothy reached over and squeezed her hand. "Jacob would have liked you." Sarah's eyes glistened. "I would have liked him too." They sat together in comfortable silence as the last light of the day faded, and Sarah thought about something Robert had written in his final letter. The very last line. The one she had read 100 times since finding it in that cold storage unit on a rainy night in Atlanta. "The truth is worth more than the money. Fight for it." She had fought for it. And she had won, not the money, something better, the truth about who she was, the truth about where she came from. The truth about a father who had loved her from afar and a brother she never got to meet, and a nephew who carried the family forward and a grandmother who opened her door and her heart to a stranger. Sarah Williams had spent 36 years being invisible. Nobody saw her. Nobody remembered her name. Nobody thought she mattered. But Robert King saw her, even when he did not know why he saw her. And in the end, he made sure the whole world saw her too, not as a maid, not as a scandal, not as a headline, as his daughter. Now here is the lesson I want to leave you with today. Some of you watching this right now feel invisible. You go to work every day and nobody notices. You give everything you have and nobody says thank you. You wonder if your life matters. You wonder if anyone sees you. I am here to tell you that someone does. Your story is not over. Your chapter is not finished. The people who overlook you today will not be the ones who define you tomorrow. Sarah Williams mopped floors for 8 years. She served coffee to people who never learned her name. She went home to an empty apartment and wondered if the world even knew she existed. And then one day everything changed. Not because she got lucky. Not because she got rich. But because the truth has a way of finding the people who deserve it most. Your truth is coming. Do not give up before it arrives. If this story touched you, I want you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who feels unseen. Someone who feels forgotten. Someone who is one chapter away from their breakthrough and does not even know it yet. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. And I will see you in the next story. Until then, take care of yourselves. And remember, the truth is always worth fighting for. The end.